There are seasons when it feels as though nothing is moving. You pray, you wait, you try to be faithful with what's in your hands. You watch other people's lives change while yours seems to remain the same. And after a while, you can begin to wonder if the things that you're asking God for are ever going to happen. You may have been praying for financial stability. Maybe you've been praying for marriage or praying, for a home, a career shift, healing in your body, purpose, peace, or clarity about what comes next. And you've waited for so long that you started to associate your life with delay. You began to think this is probably just not going to ever happen. But I'm going to encourage you today. A long wait does not limit what God can do in one season. God is not restricted by the amount of time you have waited. He is not limited by what looks delayed in your life. Even when he begins to move, he can change more than one thing at a time, right? So you're praying for the one thing and God does exponential things in your life, right? He can open a door that you cannot force open. He can provide in a way that you did not expect. He can bring restoration into a place that felt stalled for years. And he can answer a prayer while also doing something larger that you initially imagined. And I've seen this in my own life. There was a season when I received a promotion at work. It came with a new title and a salary increase. And around that same time, I received notification that my college debt had been paid off earlier than I expected. Now, I had paid most of it, but the remaining balance was cleared sooner than I thought it would. So, in what felt like one season, I was making more money and carrying less debt. Usually those don't happen in the same season. Get, the promotion, and then, now you're paying, maybe you can pay a little more toward whatever debt, but my student loan debt I was done. So those were practical changes, but they meant something deeper to me. They reminded me that God is able to shift circumstances and he's able to bring relief. Like, it, but when you experience it, it's just different. And he's able to do it in ways that make you look back and realize that the season changed more quickly than you thought it could. And then there was another period later in my life that God accelerated some blessings. So I got married. I moved to a different state. And then we had the money to pay for our wedding. We were able to pay for our honeymoon right away. And then about a year later, we bought our home together. And since then, we've been able to make improvements to our home and to, make it feel like our own. And none of this led to additional debt. I mean, except the expected mortgage. But, I don't share that to make anyone, feel as though they have to compare their life to mine. I do not share it as a formula either. I'm not saying that, if you wait long or behave perfectly enough, that God will give you the exact, sequence of blessings that you desire. That's not the message. The message is that God has not forgotten you. And, the years that felt slow, they don't mean that he's unable to move in your life. Sometimes we can wait so long that we begin expecting only small things. We lower our hope because disappointment has made us cautious. We say, oh, maybe I shouldn't want that anymore. Maybe I should stop praying about it. Maybe this is simply not for me. And again, there are desires that we must surrender to God with open hands. We do not, we don't get to demand a specific outcome. But surrender does not mean you have to stop believing that God is good. It does not mean you have to assume that your best days are behind you. It does not mean that you have to treat delay as proof that God has overlooked your life. 1 Samuel chapter 1 tells us about Hannah. Hannah deeply desired a child, but year after year, she carried the pain of not having one. Her struggle was not hidden. She was provoked by Peninnah, and she wept. She could not eat. She brought the full weight of her grief before the Lord. And, I appreciate Hannah's story because she didn't have to pretend that her desire didn't matter. She did not have to smile through disappointment. It's all good. It's okay. And act as though her pain was not real. She poured her heart and soul before the Lord. And then 1 Samuel 1:19 says, and the Lord remembered her. That phrase is powerful. That's how I felt when God blessed me with, the things that I've been praying for years. It was like he remembered me. Okay. And it doesn't mean that God had forgotten Hannah and suddenly recalled her name. That's not how God works. He's all knowing and all powerful. But God, He doesn't forget His children. It means that He moved on her behalf. He brought her situation into a new season. And Hannah conceived and gave birth to Samuel. And Samuel was not simply the son that she had prayed for. He became a prophet and a judge in Israel. So he was used by God in a way that reached far beyond Hannah's private hope for a child. And then after, Hannah gave Samuel back to the Lord. 1 Samuel 2:21 tells us that the Lord visited Hannah again, and she had 3 more sons and 2 daughters. Her story did not end with one answered prayer. God brought fruitfulness into a place that had held so much grief. And that does not mean that everyone's story will look exactly like Hannah's. But it does remind us that God can do more than we can see while we are still in the middle of the waiting. And He can answer in a way that carries, purpose beyond the immediate blessing. So we're praying for one thing, and God's like, oh gosh, I got so much more for you, daughter. Okay? He can restore the joy where there was once sorrow. He can bring, more fruit out of a difficult season than we knew to ask for. And then Ruth's story also shows that God can change life that seemed to have challenges. Ruth was a widow. She left her homeland and entered an unfamiliar place with Naomi, another woman who was grieving her own losses. And Ruth, she didn't arrive in Bethlehem with a polished plan. She went out to glean in the fields because she needed food. She was simply doing what was in front of her. She was faithful in the ordinary task. And while she was gleaning, God was arranging provision through Boaz. Ruth received protection. She received provision. She became a wife. She became the mother of Obed. And Obed became the grandfather of David. So Ruth could not have seen the full significance of her life while she was, gathering grain in the field. She may have only seen survival, but God was writing a larger story. And some of you may feel as though you are just trying to make it through the season that's in front of you. And you're applying for jobs. You're working an ordinary job while trying to pay bills. You're raising children. You're rebuilding after a divorce. You're taking care of your health. You're trying to become financially stable. You're praying in a quiet apartment. And you're doing what's in front of you while wondering when your life will begin to look different. So do not despise the field that you're in simply because it does not look like the promise yet. God is able to meet you right where you are. He's able to bring provision through places you did not expect. He's able to connect the ordinary steps of your life to a future that you can't even see yet. And Elizabeth, her story is another reminder. She and Zacharias were, well stricken in years, is what the word says. And Elizabeth, she had lived with grief of not having a child. Then the angel told Zacharias that she would bear a son, and that son was John, and he would prepare the way for the Lord Jesus Christ. God's answer to Elizabeth, it was personal, but it also carried a great purpose. Right? It was not only that she would become a mother, her son would be part of God's redemptive work. So sometimes God's blessings, it doesn't only touch our lives. And I think that's why sometimes it takes longer, because God is like, I'm preparing a way. Like, yes, I'm going to bless you with a son, but this son is going to do great and mighty things. So I need you to be positioned and ready for what I have for you, because it's not just about you. So that one blessing that you prayed for becomes part of the encouragement, the provision, the healing, or testimony that blesses others. And that's why I want you to be careful about, concluding that the slow season means nothing is happening. You may be gaining wisdom that you will need later. You may be developing compassion that will make you a safe place for another woman. You may be learning to steward money, relationships, opportunities, or influence in a much deeper way. You may be becoming more secure in your identity so that when the blessing comes, you do not lose yourself. You do not lose yourself inside of it. I mean, think of Hannah, like she gave her son back to the Lord, like dedicated him to the Lord. And had she not waited that many years for a son, who knows whether her heart's posture would have been that. You may simply be in a season where you can't quite explain the purpose yet. And so we should be humble about that. We do not always know why a prayer takes longer than we hoped. We should never, tell someone who is suffering that their pain is proof that they have not done enough or not ready enough. God's timing is not a reward system, but we can hold on to this truth, right? That God is faithful and he is not limited by delay. You may have waited for years for a change that God can begin to move in quickly, suddenly. You may have been praying for one thing and find that God opens several doors in the same season. That is my prayer for you. You may see provision, clarity, healing, connection, opportunity, and peace begin to arrive in ways that you could not have orchestrated yourself. And if that happens, receive it with gratitude. Do not talk yourself out of believing that God can be good to you. Do not minimize the blessing because you are afraid to hope. Let it remind you that God is able to write chapters in your life that look very different from the ones before them. And if you are in a waiting season and you need help releasing the beliefs that make you delay, feel like rejection, then I want to invite you to my free recorded webinar, Waiting Well, the 3 belief shifts that move you out of delay and into divine delivery. And it's for the woman who wants to trust God deeply, but also, being honest about the desires that she still carries. So the link will be below in the description. So I don't know exactly what God will do in your life. I cannot tell you the date your prayer will be answered. I cannot promise that your story will unfold exactly like mine, Hannah's, Ruth's, or Elizabeth's. But I can tell you that your life is not beyond God's ability to restore, redirect, provide for, or bless. He wants to do it for you. You are not too late for him. You are not too behind for him. You are not forgotten because the last few years have been slow. Go back to my testimony. So much happened at once. I was overwhelmed with blessing. And I pray the same for you. So keep bringing your desires to God. Keep being faithful with what is in your hands. Keep your heart open to the ways that he moves that you have not yet considered. And remember, when God begins to move, he can do it in a short season, what you thought would take years. And that's why the saying is, the wait was well worth it. That's my testimony. That's my story. And again, I pray that for you. God bless you. I will see you in the next one.